Light is another aspect of our visual experience that we covered in Lesson 2. Value can describe the brightness and darkness of surfaces. However, we don't perceive the brightness of surfaces objectively. Instead, we see it in relation to its surroundings. A surface appears darker when next to brighter surroundings, and darker when next to brighter ones. For example, in this illustration, value relationships communicate that part of the checkerboard is in the shadow of the cube. At first glance, square B looks darker than square C. But when we isolate the values, we see that B and C are actually the same. Square B only appears darker because it's next to the lighter value of square A, while square C looks lighter because it's next to the darker value of square D. Squares C and D seem to be the same color as the rest of the checkerboard, only appearing darker because of the shadow. This is because the value relationship between A and B is similar to the value relationship between C and D. Even if we could see light and dark objectively, like a light meter does, we'd still run into another problem. Our medium can't possibly capture the full range of brightness and darkness that we can see with our eyes. Therefore, we have to compress the range of brightness and darkness that we see into the more limited value range of our medium. Some information will always be lost in the process. Photographers face the same problem when choosing exposure. For example, if you were to shoot an object in front of a bright window, you'd have to choose to expose for either the interior light or the exterior light. If you expose for the interior light, the exterior will be overexposed. Anything past a certain level of brightness will be compressed into pure white. If you choose to expose for the exterior light, the interior will be underexposed. Anything below a certain level of brightness will be compressed into pure black. There's no single exposure that can capture the full range of brightness in this situation. Some information will always be lost. As artists, we have more freedom to decide how we compress brightness into the value range of our medium, but some information will still always be lost. For example, I could use the full value range to describe both the statue inside the window and the much brighter scenery outside of the window, but in doing so, I'm losing the difference in brightness between these two areas of my subject. If I want to use the full value range for the statue and still communicate this difference in brightness, I'll have to use a compressed value range for the scenery outside, and I'll lose some information there. If I want to use the full value range for the outside and still communicate this difference in brightness, I'll compress the value range of the statue and lose some information there. In the final example, I've slightly compressed the value range of both the statue inside and the scenery outside to split the difference on where I'm losing information. We can handle the problems of experiencing brightness subjectively, and the need to compress brightness into the value range of our medium, by thinking in terms of value relationships. Instead of trying to match the exact brightness of a surface with a specific value, we can observe its relationships to the brightnesses of surfaces surrounding it, as well as the brightest and darkest areas within the subject. We can then describe these brightness relationships by using values with similar value relationships in the value range of our medium. The value range of a medium is the brightest and darkest values the medium can create, as well as all the values in between. A value relationship is the distance between two values in the value range. For example, these two grays are similar, so they're close in the value range, while these two are farther apart and appear more different. In this example, despite the values being different, all four images describe a similar experience of light and dark, since they all have similar value relationships. We can see that the values of the lit areas, shadow areas, and darkest areas are at similar distances in the value range. The same areas are brighter and darker in all four versions. For this lesson's exercises, we'll explore the value range of our medium and practice controlling our values by creating value scales and practicing value transitions, so that when we're drawing, we'll be able to create the exact value that we want. A value scale is a tool that divides a value range into a number of evenly spaced steps. In this example, we'll use 9. Assigning numbers to these steps makes it easier to describe and compare the value relationships in our drawing. Creating value scales gives us practice producing specific values from our value range. I start with 9 evenly spaced squares to draw my value scale into. I like to start with the darkest and lightest values to establish my value range. In this case, the lightest value is the blank paper. I'm playing this demo back at 4 times speed because it's kind of a slow process, and I don't think it'd be very interesting to watch me do this for 10 minutes. After establishing the ends of my value range, I like to establish the middle gray next. This is just the way I've found that works for me. You don't have to do it in this order. Now I'll do the second lightest value. These are the lightest marks I can make with my medium. After that, I'll create a value that's halfway between the darkest value and the middle gray. You'll notice I'm holding the pencil with a different grip than I would for writing. I do this so I can press more of the side of the pencil against the page and create wider areas of value, rather than drawing with just the point. You might also notice that when I'm laying in value, I make strokes in one direction and then make strokes in a different direction, usually perpendicular. I find that when I do this, I get a more even value because it blends away the direction of the strokes. With Conte Pencil, I like to build up my darker values by laying in a little bit of value with each stroke. This gives me more control than trying to lay in the values quickly by just pressing harder. I've found this true with most mediums, not just Conte. Now that I have my values established, I'll go in and tweak some of them by making them a little bit darker, and try to get the steps between values as even as possible. It's normal to have to rework these as you go, instead of getting the value exactly right the first time. You can evaluate how well you did at this exercise by how even the steps between values are, and how smooth the value in each square is. We practice value transitions by creating smooth gradients between areas of value. This practice controlling our medium allows us to more confidently transition between values in our drawings. Like with the value scales, I find it important to build up the value transition slowly by layering in a little bit of value with each stroke. I also need to control how much pressure I use when I lay down the values in my strokes. I want to use a little bit more pressure at the start of my stroke than the end of my stroke to create that smooth gradation of value within the stroke, where it starts out darker and ends up a little bit lighter. It's difficult to describe how I create these smooth value gradations because it's really more of a physical skill. Even if I could describe it, you'd still need to practice to build up the skill yourself, and the process will be different with different mediums. In addition to physical skill, attention to detail will help you notice where your transitions could be smoother and how to fix them. You can evaluate your results of this exercise by how smoothly you're able to transition between values. There shouldn't be any streaks, stripes, or blotches, and the values should transition evenly. It's okay if you're not able to transition between values smoothly right away. It takes a lot of practice to get good at this. Like with the value scales, the more you practice, the more control you'll have over your medium, and the smoother you'll be able to make your values, and the transitions between those values. For your 90-minute study sessions, spend the first 30 minutes creating value scales and practicing value transitions. Spend the next 50 to 55 minutes drawing your object to the best of your ability. If you finish drawing your object before the time is up, draw your object again with the remaining time. If you don't finish drawing your object before the time is up, you can pick up where you left off in the next study session, or take extra time if you'd like. After you're done drawing, spend 5 to 10 minutes reflecting and writing on how it went. What went well, and what do you think you could improve next time? If you'd like extra accountability, post your study plan in the accountability channel of the course Discord. If you'd like feedback, post the results of your exercises in the exercises channel, and post your drawing and a photo of your object in the course critique channel. If you have any questions, you can ask those in the course help channel. I can't wait to see your work, and happy drawing!